Hello, hello, and welcome to the News in 5 for May 2022. I'm your host, Peter Martin, president of Gosselin Martin Associates. As always, thank you for joining us. The News in 5 is a look back, the month of May, old school fashion, not a lot of bells and whistles. We will look at the markets, we will look at the organization, and story number 3 will be a career best practice. We go a little bit over 5 minutes, as you know. Sorry about that, but hopefully we try to keep them brief and provide news that you can use. Let's look at the market. And when I talk about the market, I'm talking about the job market. It's an interesting time. It remains an interesting time. Hearing multiple things from folks. You know, I was talking to a person last week who said, you know, they say it's a good job market, but it's not. But yet, on the other hand, I have 2 people within my network who were let go about 3 weeks ago and were able to find jobs within 2 weeks, which is unprecedented. And so, you know, anecdotally, I think I'm hearing stories that are really across the board. I have another gentleman who told me, you know, Pete, I used to have a 90% hit rate when I would send resumes out to organizations. And he's like, I don't hear anything back anymore. He's like, what's wrong with me? And then on the other side of the coin, talking to an HR person, and she was saying to me, Pete, I have 95 requisitions that I'm working on. And so I think those 2 points or those 2 stories really illustrate kind of the battle that goes on now, where human resources and other departments are just as understaffed as facilities are. And so things are naturally taking longer. But on one hand, we have this good candidate. He's a great candidate, 90% hit rate. Doesn't hear anything, but here's your HR person saying, I'm working on all these requisitions. I just can't get to things. So, you know, the market remains really in flux. I tell people all the time, as I said, we do a lot of counseling too, which is part of the role that I enjoy. Don't get down on yourself, especially if you've been employed and you're qualified. I can't exactly tell you what's going on, but I know that every hospital is a little bit different. Some do take a long time, others move quickly. So there's no commonality, but keep plugging along because there are conflicting signals. There are jobs out there. I mean, you can go to our webpage too. I'm just going to share my screen quickly here on the goslinassociates.com/jobs website. So from the Midwest to the East Coast, down to Florida and out to Milwaukee. So you can find all those jobs on our website. Let's look at news story 2, the organization. This one's an interesting one for me. I've been giving it a lot of thought recently relative to organizations and the job market and kind of the issues that are out there. I think the first thing, and I'm not perfect, and I don't mean to be perfect, but we know that baby boomers are retiring. We know that we cannot fill all the jobs that are out there. I mean, there are organizations that have been searching for everything from VP level down to the trades level. It is universal across the United States. I know that organizations coming out of COVID are incredibly stressed. Everybody is stressed. I think that though, knowing that there is knowing that there's an employee gap, and this employee gap is only going to get better. And this is not to place the burden on just organizations, because employment is a two-way street. But I think organizations, and they've talked about this, and I know some are doing it, they need to reinvest in their employees and do it actively and do it consciously. There has to be a burden on the organization because they're the ones who write the paycheck to get that employee to stay. Now, that's not to say you kowtow to employees and that you cave to employees. We've talked about this in other news and fives before, kind of about that work-life balance and how you are working in a hospital and there's you need work-life balance. But again, you get the needs of the patients and you're 24/7, 365. But employees need to have reasons to stay. We know that some of the COVID craziness relative to people picking up and moving is starting to die down, which is a good thing. Our society is so nuts now, and I know that it's not We're not always focused on relationships and stability. But I think as organizations confront this employee gap, the reinvestment is critical in their employees. And that's not even, I'm not saying a high paycheck, but I think working together, there has to be some type of an alliance there, because I know that you can't continually look for employees. It's just too taxing for everybody. So how do you solve it? Well, you can't create people. When we do our recruitments, I tell folks all the time, I mean, we have a great network, but we can't create people. None of us can. That's only time. So how do we solve for it? We solve for it by getting employees and wanting employees to stay. So I think that has to be an organizational focus. That's bigger than facilities management. That's beyond us. But I think within our little carved out spaces, that's one of the ways to do it. The other thing too is I think organizations need to, and we've talked about this before, but I continually hear it, they need to welcome the candidates they're trying to woo. I'll tell you the one thing that I think is, from hearing just stories across, communication. If communication could just be buttoned up, I think that would go a long way. And I'm talking about communication during the recruitment process. Now I know, and we struggle with this in our role. I know that sometimes things do take a while, and communication, we communicate, but there are issues or there are reasons why we can't communicate fully and be always out there. But if communication goes back and forth between an organization and a candidate, that helps. When you go 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks without hearing anything, candidates are like, why would I want to work there? They can't communicate with me. So remember, candidates are constantly evaluating organizations as well. They evaluate on communication, they evaluate on welcomeness. I was speaking to a gentleman who had accepted a role at a hospital, and he received an email on a Friday afternoon. And on that Friday afternoon, the person who had hired him and the person that he would have been reporting into told him that they were leaving the organization. They wished him well. He backed out. He's like, I'm not going to work at that organization. That was the first time he had heard it. So I think organizations, and again, not placing the burden entirely on them, because it's a two-way street and employees have to be flexible too. But organizations, I think, need to button that up. And that's the bigger picture. Just how do we solve for an employee gap that we know is coming? One of the things, hopefully you listen to our high reliability podcast. You can get on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast. We release 2 monthly. We talk to people in the industry. We talk to HR folks. It's a great way to stay abreast as to what is going on in healthcare facilities management. It is specific to healthcare facilities management. But I would, I've said all the time, I would love to have that conversation with organizations. We recruit. I know recruiting is a commodity, but I worked in healthcare. Jack worked in healthcare. We worked in hospitals. We know what the challenges are. It's got to be, the solution has to be bigger than just recruiting. The solution has to be bigger than just people. We have said this either through our partner search program. We would love to partner even more rather than just, passing commodities along, because it's a bigger picture than just finding people. How do you keep them? And how do we communicate? How do we make them feel welcome? So anyways, I'm not going to belabor that point. I want to jump to story number 3, which is a career best practice. I'm excited that we are launching a series in June. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I'm going to share my screen. We're calling it the Abraham Lincoln Employment Series, and I'm very excited about that. First class is June 2nd. You can sign up for it. They're free. Lincoln is my favorite president. Love American history. I love the Civil War period, World War II. Fascinated by Lincoln. He's a fascinating man. And Jack and I were sitting around the office, and we were just talking about Lincoln, and thought, suppose Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln from 1865, he's still alive. It's April 10th. Suppose Lincoln applied for one of our jobs. What would we think of him? And how would we measure Lincoln? And so that's a little bit of what that series is about. But our first class, on June 2nd, is just looking at Lincoln's resume. We've talked about resumes a lot. I know that resumes are a huge not issue, but a huge burden, issue, fun, depends on your perspective. They're a necessary evil. I know that all people have different opinions on them. And so we're gonna use Lincoln's resume that we actually created. Had fun doing that. So we created a Lincoln resume, and we're gonna use that to look at the market today and to look at your resume and to just, it's a resume class using Abraham Lincoln's resume from 1865 as the basis. We'll talk about resumes that look good, resumes that don't look good, why they look good, what doesn't they look good about them. So it'll be a fun class. We're calling it the Lincoln series. We have another class on June 9th. That's actually going to be a YouTube. Then we have a podcast on June 16th we're releasing. And then on June 23rd, we have a open forum via Zoom where people can come in with their questions about their careers and just kind of tying the series together. So it'll be fun. We're looking forward to it. Hope you enjoy it. As we were putting the presentation together, it was interesting. I saw some resume. I'm going to stop the share here. See you later, Abe. There we go. All right, sorry about that. But on average, 250 resumes, and this I guess ties back to when we were talking about the market, number one, you know, Pete, I never get a response. On average, 250 resumes are sent for corporate job openings. Only 4 of those are called in for an interview. Thought that was interesting. Another one, recruiters will discard a resume if it has mistakes, according to 61% of recruiters. Applicants with spelling problems will be disqualified by 43% of hiring supervisors. When we get resumes that have either spelling mistakes, and I'm not perfect, God knows that, or they just don't look good, we'll communicate that to the applicant. The way I look at the resume part of it, and we're not grooming candidates, so I want the resume to reflect who that person is. But on the same token, I know that in this industry, in this field, people might go 10 years without looking at their resume, 5 years without looking at their resume. So at least from our perspective, and I understand why a recruiter would do that in a hospital environment, you really only have one shot. But I will tend to work with them a little bit on that because I do realize for some it's daunting. For some, it's the first time they've done it. You might say, well, a misspelling is misspelling, and you're right. But I think there has to be a level of working back and forth with folks. But yeah, I think, 61%, that's a high number. The percentage of resumes and job applications with inaccuracies is 53%. These facts are from a company called Rit Rocks, by the way. This one was interesting. 70% of college students surveyed said they would put false information on a resume to land a job. We talk about education in our June 9th program about Lincoln. We talk about education quite frequently in our all of our things, but on the podcast we release on the 16th, we'll talk about education. We talk about college and the necessity for a degree, and I'm not, again, this might sound blanket, but 70% of college students surveyed said they would put false information on a resume to land the job. So we talk about what they're learning. What are you learning? I don't know. And I say that as a person who's a college graduate. I loved my college days, but I'm not wed to a degree in these positions, and we'll talk about that further in the survey. And then the other thing, recruiters use LinkedIn to screen applicants 87% of cases. We do that too if I don't know the person. So that's just if you have a LinkedIn profile, so they'll go to your LinkedIn profile. And again, I think that LinkedIn, sometimes folks have their admins develop them for them. Sometimes folks develop them on their own, but they don't do anything with them. So kind of a warning sign. If you're going to have a LinkedIn profile, make sure it's accurate. If you don't want to have one, don't. But don't have bad information out there. I remember there was one time I went to a LinkedIn profile for a gentleman who applied for one of our jobs, and it said something like he was a lion trainer, or had the name and then said lion trainer. And so when I was talking to him, because he was a really good candidate, I had his resume, so I knew that his LinkedIn profile and his resume, they did not connect at all. And so I said, I went to your LinkedIn page, it said this, and he's like, I was fooling around one day. He's like, fooling around, put that up there, and never went back to it. So if you do have that LinkedIn profile, make sure that it is accurate. because recruiters will go to it. So anyways, that is the news in 5, the market, the organization. I hope you'll go to or attend our Abe Lincoln series. June 2nd is the first one. You can sign up on our website in the blog section. There's a link and there's an article. I'm Peter Martin. That concludes our news in 5 for May 2022. I hope you have a fantastic Memorial Day weekend. It's a wonderful country we live in, and so hopefully we all take some time over the weekend, next weekend, and respect where we are and where we live. Have a great day. Thank you so much. Peter Martin, we will see you in June.